Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we meet again in another intense episode of the dramatic story surrounding Lai Hsieh and Hung. And listen carefully. Today's episode is not going to be gentle. Because we're stepping into one of the most explosive chapters yet. The story of Hung's mother. The woman who once turned the lives of two children into a whirlwind of pain and scars. Has suddenly returned, carrying secrets and intentions that even Hung himself is afraid to face. Is she here to make things right? Or to unleash a brand new storm? Make sure to watch until the very end so you don't miss any important details. Alright then, let's dive in. The small village lying at the foot of the mountain range had always carried a rare and gentle peace. In the morning, a thin layer of mist rested on the rooftops, and the chirping of birds echoed from the bamboo groves behind the houses. In the afternoon, the breeze swept across the rice fields, sending ripples gliding softly over the water. Life here was so simple that just from the sound of footsteps on the dirt road, people could tell exactly who was coming. But that peace began to crack the moment the dark secrets of the past were dragged out from beneath the dust of time. Things once buried, thought to be long asleep, suddenly resurfaced, leaving behind tears, guilt, and a late awakening that tightened the chest of anyone who heard about it. Hung, a gentle, principled police officer, had been raised since childhood by a woman who took him in. He grew up in her arms, believing with all his heart that she was his biological mother. Believing with the pure gratitude of a child who had nothing but love to give. To Hung, she wasn't just a mother, she was the one who held his hand through every year of hunger and hardship. He gave her absolute respect. Every word, every action, he tried his best never to disappoint her. To him, she was the only solid ground he had in this world. But ever since he fell in love with Hsieh, a gentle, kind-hearted girl beloved by everyone in the village, things began to shift. Hung loved Hsieh with the sincerity of a grown man, quiet, steady, warm, and loyal. He believed his mother would be happy to see her son find someone with whom he could build a simple yet peaceful home. But reality was the complete opposite. Instead of happiness, the adoptive mother revealed a harshness that no one could explain. In her eyes, Hsieh wasn't the kind soul everyone else saw, she was a threat, a thorn she couldn't remove. She forbid the relationship without reason, shouted cruel words, and even stormed straight into Hsieh's home, driving her out in broad daylight. Hsieh could only step back, holding tightly to her wounded dignity. And Hung stood off to the side, silent, hurting so deeply he could barely breathe. The blind jealousy festering inside her was no longer just a few passing moments of irritation. It grew day by day, little by little, like poison seeping into every thought, twisting her gaze toward Hsieh into something devoid of any kindness. Jealousy turned into dislike. Dislike turned into hatred. A hatred so blind, so irrational, so endless, it consumed her. She began hiring people to follow Hsieh. Every day she sat inside her house, waiting for those men to return and report every tiny detail. Where Hsieh went. Who she met. What she did. What she said. Who she spoke to. All those ordinary things became fuel to feed the bitterness festering inside her. And then, on a fateful afternoon, the kind of afternoon that would later make everyone shiver when they recalled it, she secretly handed money to a group of thugs. Her eyes didn't flicker even once as she spoke her demand. Rough her up. Scare her. Make her stay away from Hung. She didn't want Hsieh seriously hurt, but she didn't want her anywhere near Hung either. That selfish thought led her into a cruel decision, one she herself would not dare to look back on later. But it didn't stop there. To keep paying the thugs who threatened Hsieh, she sank deeper into a path with no way out. Pawned the house, borrowed money from loan sharks with sky-high interest. At first, she thought it was just borrowing temporarily. But the more she borrowed, the bigger the debt grew. Interest piled on top of interest. By the time she looked back, the amount owed had become something no fragile woman like her could ever repay. One day, when she could no longer manage it, she made the cruelest decision of her life. She took all the money and ran. No explanation. No apology. Not even a final glance back. She left behind a mountain of debt, and the one forced to shoulder it was none other than Hung, the boy she had raised as her own. Hung struggled to repay it, scraping together every last bit he could to survive each day. The pressure crushed his chest. His emotional wounds hadn't even healed, and now the debts piled higher. Loan sharks came repeatedly, threatening him, forcing him to pay the debt of the woman who had disappeared. Yet, even in exhaustion and fear, Hung still stood firm in front of Haica. He never let her see his panic, never let danger touch her. He protected her with everything he had left, even if that everything was barely a sliver of strength. But the tragedy was still far from over. Months after fleeing the village, when everyone thought she had vanished without a trace, Hung's mother suddenly returned. Her reappearance sent shockwaves through the small community. She didn't dare walk openly into anyone's house. Instead, she slipped through the dark alleys, her expression hollow, her hair tangled as if it hadn't been combed in ages. Every day, she hovered around Haica's home. Her eyes were unsettling, at times darting quickly toward the door, at times standing motionless for minutes, staring at the house as if calculating something. In that gaze was not only nervousness, but a suffocating layer of bitterness and resentment. Villagers who caught sight of her shuddered, whispering to one another. "What is she back for this time?" The local police soon noticed her strange behavior. Fearing she might attempt something harmful, they quietly assigned officers to monitor her movements, discreetly, waiting for the right moment to catch her if she acted dangerously. One night, the sky was pitch black, with only the dim yellow streetlight glowing over the cold, damp ground. While on patrol, Hung spotted the familiar silhouette, hunched, shivering, hiding something in her hands. When he lifted his flashlight, his heart tightened as if gripped by an invisible hand. She was holding a suspicious packet of medicine. And she was walking straight toward Haica's house. In that instant, a chill ran down Hung's entire body. Without hesitation, he radioed his team, blocking all exits and preparing to intercept. The operation unfolded in complete silence. She walked slowly, each step heavy with determination, as if every escape route in her life had closed, and this was the only way left to satisfy her venomous hatred. Just as she reached out her hand to act, a shout tore through the silent night. "Freeze! Police!" The command echoed through the darkness, startling her so violently she stumbled. Panicking, she tried to run, her foot slipping in a patch of mud, sending her torn hat spinning before collapsing flat onto the cold ground. She sprinted in terror, breath ragged, limbs trembling as though about to give out. But within seconds, the officers swarmed and subdued her. Her arms were twisted behind her back, and the cold click of handcuffs sealed shut, ending the months she had foolishly believed she could outrun the consequences of her actions. As they pinned her down, she thrashed wildly, screaming in despair, her voice hoarse. "I just wanted her to pay. I didn't want to kill anyone." That scream wasn't an excuse. It was the cry of a soul falling into a bottomless pit. Hung stood only a few steps away. His whole body went numb, his chest crushed under an unbearable weight. The woman who had carried him as a child, who had given him food and shelter, was now the same person who wanted to harm the woman he loved most. A hollow, shattering pain tore through him, sharp, suffocating, unbelievable. He couldn't say a single word. He could only stand there, staring, unable to accept that any of this was real. At the station, the air was so heavy it felt as if every breath hung motionless in the room. The old yellow light dangling from the ceiling swayed gently, casting faded shadows across the stained walls weathered by time. Thin cracks ran down the edges of the plaster like crow's feet etched by a long, sorrow-soaked past. From above, droplets of condensed water fell slowly onto the cold cement floor, each small sound echoing the hollow emptiness of the moment. Hung sat there with his fingers interlaced, his back straight, though his shoulders had unconsciously slumped. Across from him sat the woman who had raised him, but the person before him now was nothing like the mother in his childhood memories. She sat hunched over, her gray hair no longer neat, but wild and brittle as if it had been swept through hundreds of storms. Her thin hands trembled on the table, as though trying to cling to the last remnants of her own fading strength. Her eyes, once sharp, once fierce, were now filled with exhaustion and emptiness, like a lamp about to burn out. Seeing her like that made Hung's heart twist painfully. The pain tore him cleanly into two. The loyal son on one side, and the police officer who had no choice but to uphold justice on the other. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice not to shake, though every word still threatened to choke in his throat. "Mother, admit your crime. I'm not angry anymore. But you have to take responsibility." The moment his words fell, the room sank into a suffocating silence. The ticking of the wall clock echoed sharply, each click cutting deeper into the tense air. She slowly lifted her head. In her clouded eyes, there was no trace of the sharpness or hatred she once carried. Only the bewilderment of someone who had wandered far off the right path, and finally realized it. Then suddenly, she broke down in tears. Not the angry, loud kind, but the quiet sobs of a person life had wrung dry, fragile, broken, and frayed at the edges. Her voice trembled, fragmented with despair. "I'm tired. I won't run anymore." Tears streamed down her hollow cheeks, carving uneven paths across a face that once held pride and severity. In that moment, she no longer resembled the mother who had guided him through years of hunger and hardship, but rather a faded shadow of what she used to be. Hung looked at her, his chest tightening painfully. He realized, more clearly than ever, that the woman before him was no longer mother in the way he had preserved in his heart. All that remained was a soul worn down by hatred, swallowed by loneliness, and dragged to the bottom by her own spiraling mistakes. Hung sat frozen, his fists clenched without him even noticing. He couldn't say another word. His entire being felt locked in place, trapped inside a pain too deep to name. The day of the trial finally arrived. That morning, the sky was blanketed with heavy gray clouds, as if preparing to unleash a punishing storm upon the village. The air was cold and oppressive, like someone had placed a massive stone over the entire land. The courtroom was packed from early morning. The old wooden benches that usually sat empty were now crowded with curious villagers, neighbors, and even people who had only heard fragments of the story. But unlike other noisy trials, today almost no one spoke. No murmuring, no sighing, only a thick, suffocating silence. Above them, an old metal fan turned slowly, its clack, clack, echoing dryly through the room, blending with the soft rustling of papers from the court clerk. Every sound only deepened the tense, breathless atmosphere. On the defendant's bench, Hung's mother sat with her head bowed. She wore a faded outfit, her shoulders shrinking inward as though terrified of being seen. Her messy silver hair covered half her face, making her look like someone who had spent months drowning in fear, hunger, and regret. Her thin, frail hands were clasped together, trembling non-stop, trembling as if every passing second was another cut to her heart. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was sharp and precise. "Does the defendant have anything else to declare?" Every gaze in the room turned toward her. She managed to lift her head just a few centimeters, enough to reveal her reddened, weary eyes before lowering it again, unable to face anyone. Her voice came out trembling, weak, swallowed by the vast quiet. "I plead guilty. All of this is my fault." Just one simple sentence. But when it echoed across the room, everything seemed to fall still. Some people sighed, others looked away, but most simply sat motionless, as if they all sensed she had completely given up. No more resisting. No more excuses. Just a human being crushed entirely by her own mistakes. Just when everyone thought that was the end. The judge was preparing to read the verdict when a small sound rose from the lower rows. It was so faint that only a few heard it at first, until the whole courtroom turned at once. Haicia stood up. Her small frame in a simple outfit seemed almost delicate, yet her eyes were steady enough to pierce through the heavy air. She stepped forward, slow but firm. Every footstep echoed sharply in the silent room, as though tapping against each person's heart. In her hands was a neatly folded stack of papers, nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, but heavier than the sky outside. She stopped at the witness stand. took a breath, and spoke. Your Honor, I would like to submit a request for leniency for her. The room froze instantly. A few whispers started but died just as quickly under the weight of shock. No one could believe what they had just heard. High CA looked straight at the judges, her voice soft but clear. No matter what. She is still the mother of the man I love. One single sentence. Yet it shattered the wall of hatred that had stood between the three of them for so long. The reaction from Hung's mother stunned the entire courtroom. She froze completely. It was as if all the strength had been drained from her body. Her eyes glistened as she stared at High CA in disbelief. Then tears began to fall, slowly at first, then more, as if they had been forced down for far too long. In that moment, she broke down completely. The cry of someone who had wandered lost her entire life, and had only now realized what she had destroyed. She collapsed to her knees, both legs hitting the cold tile floor with a loud thud. Her trembling hands covered her face, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably, on the verge of total collapse. No more cruelty. No more hatred. No more resentment. All that remained was a broken woman facing the truth. She had lost everything. Her family, her son, and even the forgiveness she had run from all these years. The final verdict was delivered as the judge's gavel struck with a weight so heavy it made the entire room tremble. That sound didn't just conclude a trial, it sealed away the dark past of a family that had endured far too many storms. The instant the echo hit the walls, the entire courtroom fell utterly silent. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The air thickened, heavy as if time itself had paused to acknowledge the fate of the woman sitting on the defendant's bench. Hung's mother bowed her head low, her trembling hands clasped together, her frail shoulders curled inward. Months of running, mistake after mistake, all seemed to press down on her small, weakened frame. Her face was gaunt, her eyes dull, like someone who had already spent every ounce of strength she once had. The sentence she received was not light. But because of the leniency request from HICA, the very victim in the case, her prison time was reduced by several years. The entire courtroom gasped. A few people covered their mouths in shock. Others blinked away tears. In the back of the room, someone whispered with a sigh. That girl, her heart is something rare. Then came the moment she was escorted to the prison transport vehicle. The large white truck rolled into the courthouse yard, cold and emotionless like a giant steel box. Its engine rumbled harshly, kicking up a cloud of dust behind it. 2 officers supported her as she walked. Her steps were unsteady, slow, each one threatening to buckle. Inside the narrow vehicle, the oversized prison uniform made her look even smaller, as if she was being swallowed whole by the loneliness of her own life. The moment the steel door slammed shut with a heavy clank, the truck began to move. And she turned back. The turn was slow, heavy, as if gathering the last fragments of clarity before her life disappeared behind 4 walls. Her eyes, once filled with rage, once sharp enough to terrify, now held nothing but tears. Tears rolling down her hollow cheeks in long, uneven streaks. No one knew whether they were tears of regret or gratitude for the mercy HICA had shown her. Perhaps they were both, blending into a sorrow too deep to describe. Her gaze drifted to Hung. Then to HICA. A gaze that seemed to speak, though no words came, only a quiet plea, a silent surrender. Hung stood frozen, then slowly tightened his grip around HICA's hand. His palm was cold, slightly trembling, yet he held her firmly, as if she was the only anchor he had left amid the emotional storm inside him. He lowered his head, voice rough. Thank you, for being kinder than I ever could. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But the weight it carried was immense, grief, gratitude, and the fragile relief of a man who had finally found light. HICA turned to him, her eyes gentle as a spring stream. She smiled softly and leaned her head against his shoulder. Her voice was warm, tender, like the last sunlight of the day. It's over now. Let's start again. A simple sentence, yet powerful enough to calm every storm inside Hung's heart. On the red dirt path leading home, their silhouettes walked close together. The golden afternoon light spilled across the rows of tall areca palms, coating the earth in a honey-like glow. A soft breeze drifted by, carrying the scent of soil, straw, and the familiar fragrance of the countryside. The air was so fresh it almost compelled one to lift their face and breathe deeply. They walked side by side, saying nothing, not even looking at each other. They didn't need to. Just walking together like that was enough to feel the weight lifting from their hearts. Each step on the red earth erased a little more of the pain that remained. Their shadows blended into one, stretching long, then short again with every turn of the path, a quiet testament that from today onward, two lives battered by storms had chosen to walk the same road. A dark chapter had closed. And in that small rural village, where so much sorrow had once fallen, two people finally chose love, forgiveness, and the gentle strength of a brand new beginning. And just like that, the final door to the past closed. Hung and Hoi finally stepped out of the darkness they had struggled through for so long, returning to the peaceful life they always deserved. But life is never completely calm. When one storm passes, sometimes the wind still carries unexpected echoes. Will the old wounds truly disappear? Will their journey really begin in peace? Or are there still more trials waiting ahead? All the answers will be revealed in the next episode, airing tomorrow. Don't forget to follow the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a comment to support the story. See you all in the next episode, where the journey of Hung and Hoi is far from over.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm qua thì mình bị đau mắt này mọi người. Nhìn rõ bị đau mắt không? Mình bị ngứa mắt quá. Mình thấy là mình bị dụi mắt như thế này. Tức là mình bị sưng mắt lên như thế này, mình bị đau mắt. Bị ngứa mắt có mình dụi nhiều quá nó bị như vậy, chắc là mình sẽ đi mua một lọ nước muối để nhỏ. Tại vì cái mắt của mình nó giống như là bị do nó bị xoang cho nó kéo lên do thay đổi thời tiết đó mọi người. Có ngứa có chịu không có nổi nên là mình ngứa đây mình không ngủ được, thế là mình dại nhiều quá rồi nó bị như thế này. Mọi người nhìn thấy cái mí này. Không biết là làm sao cho nó đỡ cái tình trạng đau mắt do thời tiết này, không biết. Cứ thay đổi thời tiết cái là cái xoang mũi của mình với lại cái mắt nó bị. Đấy là mình ở cái chỗ khí hậu nó khá là nóng và mình cũng không dám dùng điều hòa luôn, tại vì dùng một cái là hôm sau cái xoang mình nó không có thở nữa. Nếu như mọi người biết cách nào thì hãy chỉ cho mình nhé. Tạm biệt mọi người.